The screen is black. A 15 o'clock gives 14:59 gives 14:58. Red digital countdown timer appears, flickering slightly with each second. The 12,000 in gold text glows beneath it for 1.5 seconds. A high-pitched heart monitor flatline pierces the silence, then fades into nothing. The NexusTech logo appears clean, futuristic, corporate, but 1.5 seconds later, it shatters like glass, crumbling into digital fragments. As the pieces fall, a calm, serious voice cuts through. Your data was sold for $12,000. No one ever told you this is the story of NexusTech, a company that promised innovation and became a marketplace of your life. 38 minutes and 3 seconds. Time code appears in white text at bottom left. On 2018, a company called NexusTech introduced what it claimed to be a revolutionary breakthrough, an algorithm designed to understand you better than you understand yourself. It didn't just collect data, it interpreted emotion, calculated vulnerability, and built profiles with staggering precision. Over 300 behavioral categories, more than 120,000 data points per user, from what you ate to when you cried, from your spending habits to your sexual orientation, from your stress levels to your sleep cycle. It was called Persona Quant. NexusTech promoted it as a tool for personalized experience. The promise was elegant: apps that respond to your mood, health advice before symptoms appear, ads that understand your needs before you voice them. They called it a more human internet. By the end of 2018, Persona Quant had already been integrated into health trackers, budget apps, mental health platforms, and even digital dating services. But what users didn't know is that the system was quietly labeling them and assigning market value to their behaviors. In January 2019, internal documents revealed a pilot program. NexusTech had begun selling behavioral data to selected third parties. The first contract included detailed emotional and psychological profiles of 12,000 users. These profiles were distributed to over 200 companies, credit firms, insurance brokers, pharmaceutical marketers, and private data resellers. None of the users had been directly informed. When questioned, NexusTech argued that the data was that this was standard practice, but the reality was more disturbing. The system had assigned risk scores to individuals based on their anxiety, medical history, sexual preferences, and even therapy sessions. One internal file described users as emotionally primed for high-conversion engagement. One woman found out her therapy logs had been flagged and sold under a psychological vulnerability index. Another discovered her reproductive health data had been accessed by a fertility ad agency. They had never given explicit consent. They had never even been asked. In March 2019, a class action lawsuit was filed. NexusTech maintained that it had not violated any laws. The company insisted all data was handled within reasonable privacy parameters, but by then, the damage had already been done. That same year, a whistleblower from NexusTech's engineering team came forward. Speaking anonymously, they revealed that the algorithm had been intentionally designed to identify high-value emotional triggers, and that the sales system had been automated. Human review wasn't just absent, it wasn't required. By 2020, more than 120,000 user accounts had been affected. Leaked SEC reports referenced an unauthorized data transfer event of unknown scale. Internally, NexusTech had known about the breach for months. Publicly, they denied any fault. Behind closed doors, documents estimated a lifetime value of up to $235 per user, depending on the sensitivity of the data collected. The highest premiums were paid for profiles tagged with mental health struggles, sexual identity data, financial instability, and medical conditions. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a structured business operation, a pipeline, a marketplace, not one built to serve users but to package, price, and sell their lives. This wasn't a software glitch. It was a system designed to extract value, and you were the product. They call it the oil of the 21st century data. But unlike oil, data is not extracted from the earth. It is extracted from people, from their movements, their thoughts, their choices, their fears. In the age of digital platforms, everything we do is a transaction. Even when we're not paying with money, we pay with our identity, our attention, and sometimes our silence. When a user installs a weather app, they often do not expect their GPS data to be sold to advertisers. When someone uses a fertility tracker, they rarely imagine that data being packaged into profiles for insurance companies. But that is the unspoken truth behind the modern digital economy, an industry built not on transparency but on invisible agreements, buried consents, and complex terms of service that very few people read and even fewer understand. Data collection is not inherently unethical. In fact, in many cases, it improves our experience. Navigation apps need our location. Streaming services recommend content based on what we watch. Health apps help us monitor our heart rate and sleep. But the line between service and surveillance becomes dangerously thin when data collected for one purpose is quietly repurposed or worse, sold without the user's meaningful awareness. Most of the world's largest digital platforms generate billions in revenue not just through subscriptions or advertisements, but through something less visible: Data brokerage. This term refers to the collection, aggregation, and resale of user data to third parties. These third parties range from advertisers to political consulting firms, from financial risk analysts to law enforcement contractors. The average person has a data shadow, a digital double composed of everything from their browser history and purchase habits to their facial features, their moods, and even their predicted behaviors. That shadow is traded, in fragments, through thousands of hands. The user often has no way to track where their information goes, who uses it, or for what purpose. In the United States alone, data broker revenues are estimated to exceed $200 billion annually. These companies often operate behind the scenes, far from public scrutiny, with limited regulation. They build dossiers on millions of people, often including names, addresses, education level, ethnicity, income, religion, medical conditions, and consumer behavior. Some brokers boast that they can segment people into thousands of categories: young and tech-savvy renters, divorced men with conservative values, Latina moms in debt, teens likely to experiment with substances. Each label becomes a price. Each profile becomes a product. Data brokers obtain their information from multiple sources: public records, loyalty programs, online forms, mobile apps, social media activity, credit card transactions. Some companies also scrape data from the open web. Others purchase it directly from app developers. This ecosystem is vast, opaque, and difficult to regulate. One of the key ethical concerns is the lack of meaningful consent. Most people do not knowingly agree to have their mental health logs or menstrual cycle data sold to advertisers. They may have clicked accept once on a long document, but that is not the same as informed permission. True consent requires clarity, context, and choice. It requires transparency about what is being collected, why, how it will be used, and who it will be shared with. But in the data economy, transparency is bad for business. The more hidden the transaction, the smoother the profit. Another concern is re-identification. Even when companies claim that data is anonymized, research has shown that many anonymized datasets can be reverse-engineered to reveal individuals. Combining location patterns, search behavior, and demographic data makes it increasingly easy to identify specific people. In other words, anonymity is fragile, and when anonymity fails, privacy collapses. This becomes particularly troubling when dealing with sensitive data such as health information, sexual orientation, political affiliation, or psychological profiles. If a company builds a risk score based on someone's therapy sessions or genetic markers, and that data is leaked or sold, the consequences can be life-altering. Discrimination in housing, employment, insurance, stigma, harassment, exploitation. Some companies have taken data collection to disturbing levels. Reports have surfaced of platforms using device microphones to infer mood through background sounds. Others track typing speed, scroll behavior, or voice tone to assess emotional state. These signals are then fed into algorithms designed to predict not only what users will do, but how they feel in some cases. Users are divided into groups not just by demographics, but by psychological traits, impulsivity, trust level, loneliness, political susceptibility. These segments can then be targeted with ads designed to exploit emotion, not informed decision. Data has become the most powerful tool in behavioral manipulation. Political campaigns use it to target swing voters. Financial institutions use it to assess creditworthiness beyond traditional scores. Health insurers use it to identify risky patients. Employers screen applicants based on inferred personality traits, and all of it happens behind a curtain. The ethical problem is not just what is done with data, it is what is hidden from the user. People are being evaluated, categorized, judged, and shaped by systems they cannot see, let alone understand. The architecture of our digital lives is built on asymmetry of power, of knowledge, of access. Meanwhile, regulatory frameworks have struggled to keep up. In the United States, there is no single federal law governing data privacy. Instead, a patchwork of sector-specific rules exists, like HIPAA for health data or COPPA for children. Europe's GDPR has introduced stronger standards, including the right to access, correct, and delete personal data. But enforcement varies, and many companies find ways to circumvent these rules by relocating data, shifting jurisdictions, or exploiting legal loopholes. The imbalance remains. Users carry the risk. Platforms reap the reward. Some progress has been made. Whistleblowers have exposed internal practices that reveal how deeply data extraction runs. Journalists have uncovered deals between tech companies and shadowy brokers. Activists have demanded greater accountability. Some states have introduced their own privacy laws. In 2023, a landmark case forced a major health app to pay millions in damages for selling reproductive data without proper consent. In 2024, new legislation passed requiring clearer opt-out mechanisms and data use transparency. But these are small steps in a vast landscape. The truth is, once your data is out there, it rarely comes back. Data permanence is one of the defining features of digital life. A search you made 5 years ago, a message you deleted, a location you visited once. These things may no longer be on your screen, but they might still be in someone's server, someone's model, someone's profit forecast. The system is not broken. It works exactly as it was designed to. The question is, for whom, and what can we do? At the individual level, we can begin by being more cautious with what we share, reading permissions, avoiding unnecessary apps, using privacy-focused tools, opting out where possible, reporting misuse, supporting companies that respect user rights. At the societal level, we must demand better standards, ethical design, transparent data practices, legal enforcement, independent audits, whistleblower protections, and above all, a shift in values from data extraction to data dignity. Because in the end, this is not just about code or policy. It's about people, their memories, their choices, their vulnerabilities. These are not commodities, they are lives, and those lives deserve protection. What happens next is up to all of us. They told us it was anonymous, that no one could trace the data back to us, that algorithms didn't care who we were, only what we clicked, that our personal moments were just statistics, clean, detached, harmless. But in 2023, a major investigation by the New York Times told a different story. Their reporters gained access to leaked datasets from multiple consumer-facing apps, including health, wellness, and budgeting platforms. Within those records were thousands of highly specific data entries, therapy, timestamps, blood pressure, logs, sexual activity trackers, pregnancy updates, religious searches, financial stress indicators. Some records included timestamps, geolocation, and usage history so precise that re-identification was not only possible, it was trivial. A young woman's late-night searches for emergency contraception, a man's weekly reminders to log anxiety symptoms, a teenager's usage of a closeted support chat app. These weren't just numbers, they were lives, fragmented, mapped, and sold. The Times reached out to multiple users, matching public behavioral trails to anonymized data. Most had no idea their information had left the app at all. None had been told it could be sold. One user, we'll call her Lena, was a 34-year-old graphic designer living in Chicago. She had been using a mental health journaling app to process her post-divorce stress. She wrote every night for months, believing the platform's tagline, "Private by design." But in early 2023, she received an ad for a debt relief service. The subject line read, "Start fresh financially and emotionally." She was shaken. A few weeks later, she found out through a journalist's email that her journaling data had been included in a dataset purchased by a behavioral marketing firm. They had flagged her as emotionally transitional, financially unstable, and responsive to restorative messaging. She had been categorized and targeted based on her pain. Another user, a father of two, discovered that his child's usage of a sleep-tracking app had been analyzed to predict household purchasing cycles. Based on bedtime irregularities and device usage, their profile was labeled single-parent household, high stress index. The data had been sold to a company specializing in selling subscription snack boxes. He had never consented to any of it. His children's habits had been converted into marketing predictions for profit. These weren't isolated events. In the same year, an independent audit conducted by a European data rights foundation revealed that at least 47 of the top 100 wellness apps on both Android and iOS shared user data with third-party advertisers or analytics firms. Many included highly personal metrics like menstrual cycles, mood, sexual activity, sleep quality, and therapy engagement. Very few disclosed these practices clearly in their privacy policies. Almost none provided accessible opt-outs. The language used in privacy documents was vague by design. Partners, affiliates, data processors, service providers. The word sell was often replaced with softer terms: share, provide insight, optimize service performance. But the effect was the same. Data flowed from app to broker to advertiser, and the user remained in the dark. It became increasingly clear that this wasn't accidental. This was systemic. At the center of many of these apps were third-party SDKs, software development kits provided by analytics companies. These kits embedded trackers deep into the apps, silently transmitting user behavior to external servers. App developers were often incentivized to use these kits because they offered free tools, monetization strategies, and performance metrics. But those incentives came at a cost. User trust. Many of these SDKs didn't just track usage within the app. They monitored what other apps were installed, how long the user stayed on the screen, what type of device was being used, and sometimes even clipboard contents or sensor data. In some cases, they recorded when the flashlight was turned on, or when the device was held still for extended periods. One internal memo from a data aggregator revealed in court documents during a consumer protection case described these signals as ambient behavioral data. The goal to infer patterns without the user realizing what was being collected. And the most disturbing part, much of this ecosystem operated on automation. Once a user clicked accept, their data profile was activated. From that point on, a cascade of background systems began analyzing and transmitting data without human involvement. Algorithms assigned scores, tagged behaviors, estimated risk levels, and routed profiles into sales pipelines. Human oversight was minimal. In many cases, data was purchased, processed, and deployed without anyone, not even the client, seeing the raw profile. This is how a single click can set off an invisible chain reaction. A woman logs her period. The system notices she missed a week. It flags possible pregnancy. That tag increases her family development index. That index is cross-referenced with recent web searches. Her value rises in the fertility ad segment. Within 48 hours, she begins receiving parenting content before she's even confirmed her own suspicion. And the system never told her it knew. In interviews with former employees of major tech platforms, several revealed a shared internal culture. More data equals more value. Engineers were rewarded not for ethical restraint, but for clever methods of acquisition. Legal teams focused not on transparency, but on plausible compliance. The goal was not to avoid crossing the line, but to make sure the line was blurry. Users, meanwhile, trusted the interface. They believed the padlock icon meant privacy. They believed the word private meant secure. They believed that health apps, because they involved their bodies, must follow health data regulations. But many of these platforms fell outside the scope of laws like HIPAA. The information they collected wasn't protected as medical data. It was classified as consumer behavior. This legal distinction made exploitation possible in 2023. The Federal Trade Commission ruled against one of the most popular fertility apps in the United States. The ruling stated that the company had misled users about its privacy practices and had sold reproductive health data to analytics firms. The company was fined. It apologized. It updated its policy, but the data had already been sold. Other countries began to follow suit. In late 2023, Canada proposed legislation requiring all digital health apps to disclose every third party receiving user data. In early 2024, the European Data Protection Board launched an inquiry into emotion-based marketing algorithms in California. A new law granted residents the right to view and delete all data collected on them by third-party brokers, not just the apps they used. And yet, for many users the damage was already done, because behind the headlines, the policies, and the legal language there are real stories, real people. People who used an app to heal, to grow, to understand themselves, only to find out that the system saw their vulnerability as an opportunity, that their late-night tears were not private, that their hopes and fears were labeled, quantified, and sold without their knowledge. This is the real story, not a technical glitch, not a one-time oversight, but a pattern, a business model, a system designed from the beginning to extract value from human experience, and to do so quietly. The story doesn't end with exposure. It ends with choices by companies, by lawmakers, and by users like you. In 2023, after mounting public pressure and legal scrutiny, several data-focused platforms revised their policies. Some introduced clearer privacy settings, others added opt-out options. A few quietly shut down entirely. That same year, 12,000 users affected by undisclosed data sharing reached a legal settlement. They received a combined compensation of $3 million, not because the system failed, but because it worked exactly as designed, without asking. In 2024, new legislation was passed in several regions to strengthen data protection. Platforms are now required to disclose third-party partnerships, notify users of significant data transfers, and provide tools to delete personal records entirely. But policy alone isn't enough. Technology evolves faster than the law, and consent buried in legal text is not the same as ethical practice. So what can you do? Start with awareness. Read before you agree. Question default settings. Turn off unnecessary permissions. If a product is free, ask yourself how it makes money. Use tools that put privacy first. Encrypt your messages. Limit location access. Choose browsers and apps that don't track your behavior. Report what feels wrong. If you believe your data has been misused, file a complaint. Speak up. You are not alone, and silence is what allows these systems to thrive. Support legislation that puts people first. Demand ethical design from platforms. Back organizations that fight for data rights and accountability. And most of all, don't forget what this story has revealed. This wasn't just about one company. It wasn't about one leak, one algorithm, or one user. It was about a pattern, a global economy built on invisible trade. Your clicks, your health, your private moments. Sold without your name, but never without your identity. So we ask you, what do you think we should do when data leaks happen? Tell us in the comments. And if you believe this story matters, subscribe, because every subscriber helps us tell the next one.